Our correspondent live from Kumasi, Ghana, there from one of the polling units, just to give us more update as elections have commenced early at 7 a.m. in the morning.
So as Ghana decides, let's focus on one of Africa's most enduring democratic experiments. Ghana heads to the polls for its 9th successive general election since returning to multi-party democracy in 1992. Now, this election is not just another transition, it is a defining moment against the backdrop of economic challenges, regional instability, and declining trust in public institutions. Sounds like Nigeria.
Oh, yes, indeed. Now, with the ruling new Patriotic parties, Alhaji Dr. Mahamudu Bawumia and the opposition National Democratic Congress, which is John Dramani Mahama, squaring off, the stakes couldn't be higher. So will Ghana uphold its democratic legacy, or are there cracks beginning to show in this model of African democracy? And so joining us to unpack these issues are two distinguished guests. From Accra, we have Isaac Agyei, an analyst with SBM Intelligence, who will provide insight in this election's political and economic implications. And also joining us is Obed Owusu-Addai. He is the convener of the Ghana Civil Society Cocoa platform, and he will help us understand the intersection of governance and the lives of everyday Ghanaians, particularly in the agricultural sector. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. Good morning.
Hey, good morning. It's a pleasure for having us.
Thank you. Isaac, let's get started. Let's start with you, shall we? And just talk about, with the broader look at the bigger picture. Ghana has been lauded as a beacon of democracy in West Africa since 1992. Yet this election is unfolding amidst, widespread economic challenges and a worrying trend of coup across the sub-region. All right, we're looking at Mali and all the other countries. How do you think these factors are shaping the electoral atmosphere for this election?
Well, I think the first impression came in when we had the 2024 Afrobarometer report, where so you still have somewhere around 8 out of 10 Ghanaians who prefer the democratic way of electing leaders. But we all know that the cloth of democracy has been soiled by the high rise in economic hardship across the length and breadth of the West African, bloc, and that makes it difficult for Ghana at the moment. And just like you put it, this year Ghana is possibly being used as a litmus paper at this moment to test the democratic temperature in West Africa. Why? Because this is a space that has had the highest number of coups anywhere in the world. We've had Mali, we have Niger, we have Burkina Faso, and other pockets of coup across West Africa. And so at this moment, although Ghana has enjoyed free transfer of power, very smooth transfer of power since 1992, what makes this year's election a bit different is the fact that the country is experiencing one of its harshest economic hardships currently, and we know that this has the same reasons that some coup leaders actually cited in the template that we've seen across the sub-region. But the good news is that if you gauge the mood in the Afrobarometer report, even before coming into this year's election, you still will have the sense that still majority of Ghanaians prefer that democratic ways should still be used as the only way to elect leaders for the country. Although if you look at the trend analysis since the time that Afrobarometer started tracking this indicator, you could see that Ghana's figures are actually on the decline. Although you still have a number of Ghanaians who believe that democracy is the only way to go in terms of electing leaders.
Well, that's scary because Ghana is actually the beacon of the democracy when it comes to the African continent, and we're hoping that those numbers stay up. But then again, let's take a look at strategy. Let's talk about the two major contenders here. Let's talk about Vice President Dr. Bawumia and also John Mahama. What strategies are they using to get voters on their side through the course from before up until this day?
That's my question, right?
Yes, Isaac. My apologies. Yes, that's a question.
Great. So let's start with the incumbent government, who which is being represented by the Vice President, Dr. Mahamudu Bawumia. Now, they are using what we call the free SHS strategy. The free SHS strategy that is the key flagship program of this government, the Akufo-Addo administration, where they introduced free tertiary education in the country starting 2017. That has been their horn in all their campaigns in this year's election, that free senior high school, where according to them, more than 5 million Ghanaian, children have actually benefited from free senior high school program. And in fact, that's a strategy because you could see that those kids who actually enjoyed free education started enjoying it when they were 15 years, and that was 2017. So if you do the actual studies, you will realize that most of them are now eligible to vote. And so if you look at the over 700,000 newly registered voters who are actually on this year's more than 18 million registered voters, that tells you that a significant component of that are the students who actually enjoy the free senior high school, and the government is using this as a strategy to make sure that they get the biggest chunk of that pie. If you look at the the main opposition party, which is the National Democratic Congress, the NDC, led by former President John Dramani Mahama, they are using the strategy that was used in the US, where they know that a majority of Ghanaians are not concerned about the economy. And just like in the US, the economy was the #1 issue that voters were worried about. And that's the same strategy being used by the main opposition party. They have said that, look, consider what is going on at the moment. Look into your life. Are you happy? 4 years, or let's say 8 years ago. If you feel that the hardship is too much, if you feel you cannot afford goods and services, if you feel that the cedi depreciation is affecting you, if you feel that, if you go to the hospital, you struggle to pay your health bills, and if you are not able to cater for your family, in fact, all they're talking about is cost of living, transport, fuel, food, what have you, inflation, which peaked around 54% in December 2024, now is still around 23%. This is the strategy that the main opposition party is using. And at the moment, we all know the dislike for incumbents across the world at the moment. But what we also know in Ghana's election is that although the main opposition party has the momentum on their side and they are using the current circumstances to campaign, it is still very close to call in this year's election. This has actually been the closest election to call. And you can compare it to what happened in 2008, where nobody was able to get that 50% plus one requirement, and the election had to go to a round-up in 2008. And we know that the then opposition party actually won the elections with just about 40,000 votes. Are we going to see the same way? Are we going to see a government that came to power in 2016 with a vote margin of more than or close to 1 million to one that has been reduced to a little below 600,000, and maybe to what happened in 2018? So, if you're talking about strategy or campaign strategy, we know that, the current, incumbents are using the free senior high school program, and the fact that they say they are going to run what they call a flat tax in the country, and then you have the main opposition party also campaigning using the current economic circumstances, and they're saying that, look, this government has heaped on you a number of nuisance taxes, including the electronic transaction levy, COVID-19 levy, and then also what we call the pollution levy, including what most youth are not happy with, which is the 1% withholding tax, betting tax on their earnings.
Now, very insightful analysis there from you, Isaac. Many thanks. But let's also bring the part of governance into this conversation, right, and how it impacts the people. And let me come to you, Obed. This election is not just about who governs. It's about how governance impacts the people. And we've seen, from Isaac's analysis and what we've seen on ground, Ghana's economy is still recovering from the effects of high inflation. There's austerity measures ongoing, and there's also debt restructuring. How are these, bread and butter issues affecting voter sentiment going into this election?
Well, thank you very much for the question, and I do agree with all the points that Isaac made. Well, on governance issues, just as Isaac said, this election, the opposition party is making it about your life, how you are living your life, how the economy is affecting you. But what we also need to understand, and one point that Isaac made that I want to put into perspective is that the current government is running on its record, and the incumbent or the opposition party has been in government before. So it's not like they are running on a clean slate. So when it comes to governance, when it comes to corruption, when it comes to the way of life of the people, we have had an example. We have lived under the governance of John Mahama before. And so when you compare the John Mahama 4 years to the Dramani Mahama, no, to the Bawumia and Akufo-Addo 8 years, there is a comparison to make there. And when you ask the youth, especially, they will tell you that currently the hardship is bigger than the experience under the John Mahama administration, because when you look at corruption, incidences of corruption, there has been a lot of incidences of corruption where the presidency has been seen as the seat of corruption, actually giving white papers on documents that are sent there for his action, and he doesn't take action. So all these things are playing at the back of the youth and also the voters when it comes to governance. Again, when you look at the Mo Ibrahim index that has been published, you realize that the governance structure or the governance system in Ghana, or perception about transparency governance in Ghana, is dropping as compared to what used to exist under the John Mahama example. So all these are played out when you go to the street, when you talk to ordinary Ghanaians. The things they keep telling you is that, yes, we have lived under this government before, and we have also lived under John Mahama, and we are going to make our decision based on the conditions that existed. Of course, the argument that the incumbent is making is that John Dramani Mahama did not live under COVID-19. He didn't face this very, very economic crisis that faced the world. And so that comparison cannot be made. But it's politics, and it's African politics, and people will play on the emotions and intelligence of the voters using every shred of data that they can gather. So on the ground, in respect to governance, there is a comparison happening, and the people, most of the people that have engaged, especially the farmers, the cocoa farmers that we have engaged with, they are telling us that when you look at the percentage of increment in the cocoa price compared to what we enjoyed under the previous government, with respect to the international market price, you realize that they felt it was better under the previous government. So a lot is not going well for the current or the incumbent government. And so those are some of the sentiments that are playing out with.
Obed, it's very interesting how you and Isaac have actually plotted this out. It's very clear now exactly what each party strategy is. On one side, you have incentive versus on the other side, you have the anguish that the people have been going through. And this is what the governments, or rather the two parties, are trying to leverage on. But however, would you say that perhaps the incentives that have been, the incumbent had 80 years to actually plan out its incentives heading towards these elections. Would you say that that has sunk its tooth or gotten deep-rooted impact in the people, that it might force some kind of good competition for the opposition who have chosen to go with the sentiments of the people, the anguish? Would you say that this is both strategies are contending properly, 50-50, or maybe not so? Obed, please.
Thank you once again. You need to consider the block of voters. The average Ghanaian voter is probably not as informed as you would expect them to be. And so you need to look at who is voting and on what issues they are voting on. When you look at the youth, and especially those that are educated, and you realize that they're considering some of the digitalization that the current government has brought into the space. The Ghana card, which has become your tax identification number, which you are able to do a lot of things with it. And just recently, they piloted the e-gate. When you have a Ghana card and you have traveled outside Ghana and you come in, you can use your Ghana card and you just walk straight without any immigration hassle. So all these technology, all this digitization that the incumbent government has brought within the educated class, you realize that people are really receiving it very well. But when you go to the ground at the community level, people feel like this is it's not addressing the bread and butter issue that I am really particular about. So it depends on the voting block that you want to assess. And what we have realized is that, especially in Ghana, the Ashanti region that votes mostly for the NPP are generally rural communities, and you realize that they really do not really care about some of these digitization and the incentives, as you put it, that the current government has brought. So that is why most people are saying that if the current government is not able to hold on strongly to its stronghold of Ashanti region, then they are bound to lose this election. And from what is playing out on, especially at the public space, it does appear that momentum is on the side of the opposition party with respect to even the stronghold of the ruling party. So yes, there are incentives, there are a lot of new things, technology that the current government has brought into the space that the average Ghanaian, educated average Ghanaian will see as very good, and that it has the potential to propel Ghana into a certain space within the African continent. But for the ordinary rural Ghanaian voter, all those digitization, all those incentives are not really playing out very well for them. What is playing out very well for them is the free SHS policy that Isaac mentioned. And personally, in my house, I've had 3 of my nephews and nieces going through the process without paying any fees. So you realize that most of those communities, and especially the households that have enjoyed the free SHS, they will see this policy as reflecting in their lives, and they will vote for the incumbent government. So there are a lot of dynamics that are playing out, and it is difficult to make a conclusive decision without taking into consideration
Obed,
the diverse voting blocks and all
Obed,
that.
I wanted to stop you there because that was the exact reason why I asked that question. How far did that effort go when it comes to the incumbent? How far did they go in touching people's lives? So these people that you're speaking about, that you're saying that perhaps maybe they might be the ones who would vote back in the incumbent. What proportion of Ghanaians, how far did it go? Did it go into the villages, or was it just an urban thing? Just so that we can get an idea of the voters that we're expecting to come out and vote for the incumbent today?
Well, with respect to some of the digitization policies and strategies that were introduced, it went across the country, but those who are feeling the effect the more are those in the urban communities and urban areas. So you need Ghana card to do banking transactions. And the statistics in Ghana show that it's only the elites and the educated that does banking. Most of the rural communities, they keep their money under their bed and all that. So it has been done across board, but those who are really having the effects on their lives are the elites within all the educated within the community. But like I did say, there are other policies that are also touching the lives of the rural community, and key among it is the flagship program for the incumbent, which is the free SHS, which I can attest that has gone very, very deep down in the community level. There are some rural communities that since they set up the community, nobody has gone to secondary school from that community. But because of the free SHS, they have been able to get their wards or their children being able to go to secondary school, and now being at least secondary school graduates. And so these are some of the things happening. Maybe the other key issue is the National Health Insurance Scheme. Ghana has a National Health Insurance Scheme that is open to everybody that contributes to the Social Security. What this government has done is to decentralize it and also expand it and digitize it. So now you don't need to go and register. You can use your Ghana card ID number, and then you can enroll onto the National Health Insurance Scheme. So these are things or interventions that are touching the lives of the ordinary community member. Then you can also talk about the agricultural sector, planting for food and jobs. which is one of the flagship programs of the current government when it comes to agriculture. And you realize that they provide a lot of incentives for farmers, and they were at a point, there were bumper harvests, but of course, due to road network and other things, we're still not getting the food in the cities and towns that needed them the most. So there have been a lot of interventions that have cut across the country, but depending on which one you weigh, you realize that some of them are really, really inuring to the benefit of those who are in the cities. For example, they cancelled road tolls. So across the country, this current government cancelled road tolls. It had a lot of backlash, I must say. But ordinarily, when you speak to motorists, taxi drivers and trotro drivers, they are happy because they don't have to pay road tolls and all the hours that they spend in traffic. They don't need to do that. So all these things are some of the interventions, but you need to juxtapose it against which building block that you are assessing and on what issues that they care the most about that's influencing their voting.
Obed, is very interesting because everything, I don't know, Judith, I have to come to you and tell you this.
Right.
I don't know, everything Obed has said, he touched on health, he touched on amenities, he touched on road tolls. What else did you touch on again?
Agriculture.
Agriculture. It seems like the incumbent is doing a lot, and if you want to compare it to the Nigerian instance,
I always say that when it comes to West Africa, or even any African country, but particularly West Africa, all countries in West Africa, it's almost like it's the same side or different sides of the same coin. 9 times out of 10, that's what you find. But let me come to you, Isaac, and talk about the similarities that we've seen. One of them is security concerns. Going into this election, there have been concerns about violence. During the last 2020 elections, there were violence that broke out during that time. What are the key factors driving fear of election-related violence this year? And how prepared do you think that security agencies are, to tackle violence in this election cycle?
Well, when you have election that are close as, it's always on a knife edge, that tells you that incidents of violence are likely to occur. But generally, Ghanaian elections have been free, fair, and transparent, devoid of any form of significant violence. But it's human life that we are talking about here. So even if one person dies, it is still important to talk about, especially what happened in Techiman South. In this year's election, the projection is that you could have a number of violence, looking at how tight the race is going to be. And you have an incumbent that has, an opposition party that is trying for the 3rd time to come back to power. They tried to maintain power in 2016, it did not work. Tried to come back in 2020, it did not work. They're trying to come back again in 2024. And remember that they had a lot of issues with the 2020 elections. They had a lot of issues with how people were actually treated in Techiman South, for instance, where a number of people died. But what we are learning, or what the information that we have, is that in this year's election, the police is beefing up security. And in fact, the military are being taken out of the arrangement at the moment, the immediate arrangement, in terms of interventions. They'll only be needed, they'll only be used as the last resort when they have to come in. And Obed can attest to this fact that since last 2 weeks, you be in your house, you see, you hear the sounds of helicopters, and if you're on the streets, you see, police vehicles. Police visibility is almost everywhere. And in terms of the total number of deployment this year, we've never seen any number like that this year where, for instance, what is beautiful is that you're going to have a whole information center that is being established or put together by the Ghana Police Service. And what they seek to do is to respond to issues and also help to fight mis and disinformation also in the space. Why is this important? Because this is our first real social media election.
Right.
The closest we had was 2020. But this is an election that, most of the campaign was actually done on TikTok, on Facebook, and on the social media platform. And we know the tons of misinformation and disinformation and also fake news, deep fake out there. And the police are, this will sometimes result to some, violent activities in terms of spreading mis and disinformation. And the police are are actually going to set up a center to debunk some of this. They are going to talk to the media and address Ghanaians from that side. But in terms of violence, we are projecting at SBM Intelligence that we may have a higher number compared to what we saw in the 2020 elections, looking at how tight the race will be. But we are also looking at how the police is hoping to neutralize or respond to some of these projections.
Isaac, I'm really glad we're talking about misinformation and disinformation is spreading this during this campaign. But due to the intelligence that you have, what are the contributing factors? What are the cause behind this disinformation and misinformation around? Is it just because this is the first ever type of social media based elections that we're seeing, or is there more to it than that it just missed the eye?
There's definitely more to it. Both parties know that, this is a country that you have a significant number of people who are not literate, or they are not able to possibly read between the lines. And that's a significant part of the voter population. And so how many Ghanaians or how many of the rural Ghanaians even know between deepfake? They simply do not know. All they believe is that I heard Bawumia's voice, I heard Mahama's voice. And so both political parties know the benefit of deepfake, misinformation and disinformation at this moment, and that is why they are using it. And that makes journalism and even security in Ghana even a bit complex, because now if you're a journalist, you need to learn how to debunk mis and disinformation and fake news. But the motivation is that both political parties are aware of the political capital in this mis and disinformation. In fact, I was on a X, I think about 3 days ago, where definitely, on X, people are able to read between the lines, but you could still see that people are boldly sharing content that you can just by a click of a button know that this is deepfake, this is AI generated, and it's become like a rebuttal. If MPP decides to release a content that is generated using deepfake, the the NDC will come and rebut with the same content using that same technology. And so it's made Ghana's election a bit complex this year in terms of adding that level to the security situation, where we believe that with a very high dissemination of fake news, this could add to the number of violence activities that we may see across the length and breadth of the country. So it is the political capital at the end that's actually motivating both political parties to actually engage in this.
Very interesting times, I would say, for the elections. Obed, let me ask you about the growing mistrust in institutions. We've seen this, and you talked about this as well in your earlier submissions. But let's talk about this in regards to the Electoral Commission and the judiciary in Ghana. How crucial is civil society when it comes to bridging this gap and ensuring transparency in, when it comes to governance and governing?
That's an interesting question. For a very long time, Ghana has been seen as a democratic country, but there is this African proverb that when you see a forest, you think it's all together, but when you get closer, you realize that each tree is separate. It's the same thing in Ghana. When you are outside, you think everything is rosy, but when you get closer, you realize that there are cracks. And there have been cracks everywhere. When you go to the judiciary, there is a lot of mistrust from the opposition parties to the government when it comes to appointment of judges to the Supreme Court. That has become one of the major tussles in recent years. And not just that, but some of the rulings that these justices that have been appointed have meted out. You realize that when it doesn't go in favor of the opposition, they always begin to cry foul. Not just only the opposition, but even civil society. We have had the cause to question some of the decisions that are made with respect to judicial decisions and appointments in recent years. And that is one of the things that led to the massive demonstration that we saw. It was the passage of a law, the LI 2452, which gave rights to people to enter forest reserves to mine and that is what created all these what they call it, campaign and all these protests on the streets when people rose up against illegal mining and galamsey. And so yes, there is, and then the second probably very, very disturbing governance challenge or the crack that we are seeing is how the government reacts to publications of corruption or incidences of corruption within the government. Yes, this government appointed or set up the office of the special prosecutor, but civil society has had a cause to question the motive and even the commitment of the government to resource the office of the special prosecutor to undertake its duty, its independent duty. There have been several cases that has gone to the office of the special prosecutor that, especially civil society, I'm usually using civil society and not the opposition, just to let you know that it's not just the opposition, but civil society, independent civil society, have questions about some of the outcome of those investigations. A key one is the Siagapa money, and this minister, they found a lot of money hidden in her home, and she couldn't explain how she got the money. But when it went to the office of the special prosecutor, nothing concrete came out of it. And so there is a growing mistrust even among how the independently appointed institutions operate. And one of the most disturbing decisions that was made by this government was the termination of the appointment of the Auditor General. The Auditor General, who was seen as very independent, very efficient, for no apparent reason, his appointment or his contract was terminated with a lot of political undertones. So all these governance things that are happening within the space is creating that mistrust and also agitation among the opposition, and also to a very large extent, civil society are also having cause to question the commitment of the incumbent government to our democratic credential. But I always say, this election is about comparing records. And when you also look at what we experienced under the previous government, not so different. And so it creates that kind of, would I want to shift from this system to another system when I'm not too sure, or at least I have lived under them before and I know what they are also capable of doing. And so all these things are creating a lot of tension and mistrust within the system, especially when it comes to the judicial decisions and some of the independent bodies that have been set up by the constitution, but because of a lot of political decisions, they are not being effective as they are supposed to be.
Obed, if there's one thing that's clear from both your submission, Obed and Isaac, it's clear that there's a yearning for stability and for progress when it comes to just governance in Ghana and really for West Africa. But Ghana is the beacon of democracy, and this is a litmus test indeed, and we hope to see what today would pan out to be. Only time will tell. Well, Bernard, as I said, Bernard, Obed and Isaac, many thanks for doing this with us. We appreciate you for coming on and taking out the time this morning to give us a more in-depth analysis on how the elections will pan out today. Isaac Agyei, he is analyst with SBM Intelligence. We have Obed as well. Obed is part of the CSO. There's a convener of the Ghana Civil Society COCO platform, and they joined us together to have an in-depth discussion on Ghana's democracy. Once again, many thanks, gentlemen, for coming on.